A lot of people don't realize if you spark a panel, you're never getting insured again. You're never getting none of that's ever going to happen. So, I mean, I work for a company pretty regularly where one of the reasons that I do so much revenue from this particular company is because they've had several floor sanders burn up panels in their businesses, and I guarantee them that that won't happen.
Right, Hardwood Floor Pros. If you've read Wood Floor Business Magazine or follow the Fellowship of Floor Pros online, you know them, you love them. TJ Haas, Mad Science Hardwood Floor, Syracuse, New York. Soups to nuts today, bowling alleys, electrocution, rotary sanders, ghost stories, human sacrifices, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. TJ brings down the house today in this episode of All Things Wood Floor, brought to you by the best and brightest and through Wood Floor Business Magazine. Floor pros around the world, let's get to it. TJ Haas, welcome to All Things Wood Floor.
Thank you.
Is that Timothy J? Is that what that is?
It's my first name is, well, we're going to get into a fun thing because half the industry doesn't know this. My first name is Timothy John.
Okay.
So
you're from New York, so they can say TJ. Down south, they use their middle name for everything. I wanted to start off this whole thing because I have an opportunity every now and then to read snippets of things that either you put on Facebook or you put online, and you write a lot for Wood Floor Business Magazine. So I wanted to start this by telling you what you don't know about me is I've been doing this 35 years. My way is the way to do it for 35 years. And if you haven't ever heard that before, this is the way things should be done. We always ask people at the end, what's their pet peeve? You wrote a whole article on this, correct?
Yeah, I did.
I freaking hate that crap.
And it's so strange because it always is 37 or 35. It's always very specific that they pull out. I've been doing this for 35 or I've been doing this for 37 years. And I just remember my father yelling that at me. And, and it just is one of those things where every time you say that to me, I almost immediately shut down. And it's not out of disrespect because I know a ton of guys that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40. I mean, I knew a guy that did this into his 90s and, they always want to cite that. And it's like, oh man, but come on, here's the thing, and I try to hit them with some logic or something maybe that they might not know, and they shut down. So then we're at an impasse, and it's a chronic argument. But yeah, that's a hysterical
it's funny because you travel around the country, and I'm in New Hampshire, you're in New York. The little speeches that we have, I read the article that you wrote. It was entitled that, and I'm like, I said that all the time. When I'm in seminars, I go, if I get one more builder that says, I've been building houses 35 years, they're 29. Somehow they've been building houses 35, or they're 37, they've been building them for 35. There's always a number. I remember when I was a really young kid, I sold power tools. I was 18 or 19, and I'd been there a year, and I sold on the floor, just talking to wood craftsmen, and my boss one day goes, you do not have every single tool we own at your house. And I realized that was always my thing. I have one of these at home, and I really like it because... But I did. I bought every tool I could.
I'm a big person with that because you see guys coming up with, hey, what's the deal? This tool, whether it's a palm sander or a saw or something like that. Yeah, no, there's a stack. We have something like 9 track saws because I'll see one. If I like it, I'll pick it up. And we, instead of changing blades on a job, or if we're running multiple different kinds of blades on a job, we might use 2 or 3 track saws on a job. So I just said, I'm going to buy them all and see how they all do. And so we figured out, what we like for our demands and all that. And if I can shoot out and say, hey, this is the one that we found has the best power, or this one has the best battery life or something like that, then I like to throw it out there. So,
well, I think at Wood Floor Business Magazine, I saw they did this little contest where they said, just post the last photo you took, and you had a track saw in there, right?
Yeah, I think I was using the Mafel, the Mafel KSS 40, which is the little tiny guy. It's a crosscut and a track saw. It's like one of my favorite tools, and I'm a big user of their tools. And that little thing saves me unbelievable amounts of time on a job because I'm really using it as my only saw for most wood floor things. So,
well, I just used track for the first time ever. It's a fine system with tracking. And when I was a floor guy, when we first decided to make, precision cuts and maybe, box in and overextend the herringbone and clip it off, and then we would route it and whatever, we would get the straightest flooring or just steal the pine base trim and screw it into the floor and use that. I just used this track stuff for the first time. It's amazing. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. For years, we would carry extruded aluminum straight edges, or we would carry, we would use our levels as straight edges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And even with that, you can't beat the quality of cut that you get from a track saw, and that's a big thing for me. Where especially when we're doing bowing work, we don't have a lot of tolerance to play with, so. If I'm fitting a panel, I have 30 thousandths of an inch. That's basically it. So if I start to walk or I get blade flex or something, then there's $1,500 that I got to spend replacing a synthetic lane panel or any of that stuff. So the track saws have been huge for us.
I had one a few weeks ago. I was making some samples. We set up those nice tables too. You can set up the table, drop the track down. And I was going along, and I must have got a little cocky or it didn't catch, and I had my headset on. It was really a tough cut. Usually just slice through, and I looked down, and there's pieces of aluminum smacking me in the face. I must have brought it down crooked, and it's non-ferrous, so it's not going to spark, and I'm just chewing through the track. It's brutal.
I have a track that has a big moon cut out in it. And it's from the big one. It's from the Festool TS75. So it's a huge gouge.
Big saw.
Yeah.
Love that crap. So, hey, the name of your flooring company is?
Mad Science Flooring.
I like that. Everybody's got Bob's, Ted's, A and B, A and C, D and F, E and G, finest floors, perfect floors. I love it. Where'd you come up with Mad Science?
It was actually something that a buddy of mine said to me because I had first started out in flooring, and then I went and did something else for a little while and came back into it. And he said, yeah, just go, I was interviewing for a job, and he said, no, I don't think this is going to be right for you. He said, why don't you just go do that Mad Science thing that you do? And I was like, that's a good name. I like it. And it had to do with when we first started up, it's almost 11 years ago now, the second time into flooring. I had a really long name, and I thought that was going to be the best thing ever because I wanted to have the biggest name, and I wanted it to be something that people would have to ask me, repeatedly what the name of the company was to get it in their head. And as it turns out, then that became a pain in the butt. And then another company had a similar name that they had trademarked, and they sent me a trademark copyright thing, and I was like, nah, I'm going to lose that. So when we started back up, not that we started back up, when I changed over and we started selling equipment stuff or selling tools, that was when I said, well, I'll just start another company, call it something else. And the Mad Science Flooring name came up. My logo got created in that. And then we just ran with it from there.
The logo is your beard and glasses. Is that what that is?
Yeah, the logo is like my face in the circle and everything. Oh, yeah. And if you actually look, it's the Porter Cable logo.
It looked a little familiar.
Yeah, so it's the Porter Cable Floor Sanding Division logo, and we didn't even have to change to Syracuse, New York, because I live right around the corner from the old Porter Cable factory. It's
funny. I started out in tools and equipment, and I met with Porter Cable because I helped design one of the early flooring guns, the BHF gun, with the engineers over there, and I used to sell Bostage. And I talked to my Porter Cable rep, and I go, you got to get into the flooring business. They go, oh, we'll never get into the flooring business. And it took decades before they actually started to get in there. But they were Porter Cable Delta, part of Milwaukee Foley, part of Delta Foley, part of Rockwell International. They make some of the best hand tools in the world. They're over by your neck of the woods, huh?
Well, so the original Porter Cable before Rockwell got involved until the early 60s was actually a family-owned thing out of Syracuse. And then Rockwell also had a division in Syracuse, so Rockwell bought the Porter Cable name, but Clark bought the floor sanding division. Oh. So, the old Porter Cable F-89s and F-87s and stuff, they wound up under Clark, which then that design has subsequently become the Galaxy sander.
Right, Clark American, and then Galaxy.
Yeah,
Galaxy.
So Galaxy out of Toronto. Galaxy is a Porter Cable F89 or F87 drum sander chassis from, like 50 years ago that they've converted to run into as a belt sander. It's a great design. But so Porter Cable actually had its original, like the Super 7. A lot of people don't realize that the most popular edger in the world is originally a Porter Cable design. So I still have an old round top Super 7. It was called like an SC7 or something.
They used to have the spinner, and they had the whippet.
Yeah, well, this is even this is even different than the whippet. It looks like a Super 7, and then it has a round Porter Cable logo on it. I'll have to try and see if I can find it and send some pictures over.
Was that when they used the older drum machines? They used to use the GE motors, the polyphase motors?
American Lincoln had the polyphase GE.
Yep.
Yes. Lincoln was one division that eventually got bought out by Clark. They were out of Toledo, Ohio. And then Porter Cable was out of Syracuse, New York. And so Porter Cable made tools and floor sanders. And so the Porter Cable floor sanding division wound up under Clark, but all the tools like circular saws and all that wound up under Rockwell with Simmons and all them. And then now it's part of Stanley Black & Decker.
I have a Porter Cable circular saw, and it's 70 years after my father had his. I think it was a Rockwell circular saw, identical design. His was all steel, mine was mostly cast, and the parts are interchangeable. When I used to sell power tools, I say to people, don't be a slave to the color and what they look like. Each company makes something a little better. Milwaukee makes a good Sawzall, so does Porter Cable. Bosch makes good routers. Everything seems to be a little different. Today, it seems to be a little different. People like to have the same color. If they're buying yellow, they're buying yellow. If they're buying red, they're buying red.
Well, battery tools tend to lock people into a system. So when you buy a cordless tool, you always want to buy the thing that works with your batteries. And so that's kind of locked a lot of people down. And electric tools, I go on jobs and I see a guy with a DeWalt jigsaw and a Milwaukee reciprocating saw, the corded ones. But once you get into a cordless system, everybody's loyal to some brand of cordless because probably either they got a good deal on it or their dad had something like that, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I saw for Christmas they get these racks now. You can mount them or wheel them, and it'll hold every single battery, all your charger units, and like you said, you can store them all up however you need them.
Yeah, I'm going through right now and kind of organizing everything like that.
So how did you get into this? Go way back. Are you a generational floor guy, or how'd you get into this?
So yeah, I'm generational. It's not the same company that's transcended across the generations. We've all kind of started up our own thing. But I went out as a kid. My father ran a bowling lane finishing company that we would go out and visit him while he was traveling during the summer. And we would do odds and ends kinds of things. And that was, I always tell the story everybody always tells the story about me. The people that were around then is that we used to have these big 44 by 70 sanding belts. It's 44 inches wide, 70 inches long. And I used to sleep in the boxes when we traveled around with my dad. And I did that as, when I was small enough to fit in them. And so growing up, we always went out on the road with my father and we would help out and all that. And when I got old enough to actually do some work, I wound up on my father's refinishing crews. I always make the joke that I failed a math class, which is only partly true. But when I was early teenager, a friend of mine died and I didn't want to be home. So I kind of took off with my dad. Sure. And it just stuck. I always say that he handed me a machine and kind of walked away, and I'm still waiting to see if he comes back.
If he comes back
for it. But, so I worked all through my teenage years and into my early 20s. I worked on my dad's bowling lane crews, and we did everything, refinishing, whether it was wood bowling lanes or we would do like the newer style with just the wood approaches and then the synthetic lanes. We did synthetic lane installation, and then I did any kind of equipment installation in the bowling centers. So not just sand and finish, but one week we might be doing computer scoring, and the next week we might be doing multimedia packages and all that kind of stuff. But so I stuck with that until my early 20s, and then I kind of saw the writing on the wall of that company that it was going to be kind of fallen to the wayside, and that was where I learned the most. Though is going out there every year, standing with my dad, running equipment. And I always say that we used to have almost 100 people that worked on all the different crews that my father had that would run around and refinish all year, or some of the guys would come in and only do 4 or 6 months, and they would just knock out as much work as they can because it's a seasonal kind of thing.
Yeah.
So as the workload came down, that didn't mean, or I'm sorry, as the amount of people that worked for that company started to trickle down, that didn't mean that, we didn't have to do as much work. So we had to learn more and do more and get more proficient with it. And it just stuck with me is working, sanding floors. We did the residential side for my dad. I did all of his residential.
Did they juggle?
Floors
They didn't just do gyms, or did they juggle it, or did they have to travel all over the country?
We traveled all over the country in the summer. So basically, in the bowling industry, from the beginning of April to late March until the end of April is when your bowling leagues kind of start to end, because they mostly bowl during the winter, and then people transition into golf or something for the summer. And so from early March or late April, depending on where the area is, to Labor Day in September is when we have to fit all of that work into those days.
Okay.
And so we would do as much work as we could in those days. And then after that, we would have maintenance things that we had to do. My father would send us out and have us refinish interior floors or do apartments or occasional gym floors and stuff like that. Pretty much anything that, kept revenue generating when we were slower in the winter. And so we managed all of the, the facets of floor sanding from that side of it. But we would do 10 million, 12 million feet in the summer, just in the summer.
Wow.
And then might go sand some residential apartments or do residential homes in the winter and do normal style stuff. Do a 1,000 square foot house in 3 days or 4 days, like you hear from these guys when they were running. So that was our light work. But
every time you're in a certain geography, mostly a major city, like I'm close to Boston, we all here know the one family that came up through bowling alleys. We don't know a lot about it. Matter of fact, we have one here that's called a duck pin lane, which no one's ever even heard of a duck pin lane. We have candle pin, which a lot of people have never heard of, what we call 10 pin, and then we have duck pin. But a couple things I'd like to ask you. Back in the day, and I have a section of a piece of an alley somebody laid out. Stuff's thick. Right, it's like end grained laminations, like a giant. What's a section? People think it's one big thing, isn't it? In giant sections.
Well, so lanes are actually built sideways compared to what a flooring installation would be. It's almost as if you took a piece of inch and 5/32 or inch and 3/32 thick board that was 3 1/4 wide, but then you take it and stand it up
like
on
butcher
end.
block.
And then there's an alignment tab, as Lenny once called it, that we would call the tongue and groove. And then they're actually built on her side. So you would start 3 boards, nail them all together, and then you stack them and you nail down through. You're pulling 3 boards at a time, and then we would lay the whole lane down in one piece.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay. So then, all right. Now, is it, when you look at and they take the gutters and all that stuff out of there back in the day, are they all, it has to be level, right? Do you have to go through then and level before you can sand, or how do they work that?
So when we would install, usually we would install and then sand them immediately. Okay. There's never, you can do like laid down sections for wood lanes where we would actually lay them in place, but then we would have to basically wind up blushing the seams where we would section in we might move one lane from a place in Syracuse to a place in Buffalo or something when a bowling center closed or moved. and that would be when we would cut lanes into pieces, move them, and then reseam them together, which we could do just by drumming the seam, and then that always looked terrible. So we would actually build the wood lane and then sand a wood lane in place. And as we're sanding it, that's where we would do our leveling.
Do you remember the size or what the square footage is of a lane?
A lane comes out, a lane with the approach and the fill sections that make up the rest of the approach in between comes out to be like 225 square feet.
Okay.
But the basic specifications are 42 inches wide, and from the foul line to the center of the head pin spot is 60 feet plus or minus half an inch.
And the center of the head pin, that sits on a steel plate, right? That's not wood, is it?
No, it depends. Like for duck pin bowling, they do have steel decks. I don't remember candle pin. I think they originally had wood decks.
Yeah, it's wood because they leave the wood in the lane.
Yeah, and then 10-pin decks are originally wood, but we did have the first thing that went synthetic in the bowling industry was the pin deck area, because
yes,
that the pinfall area took the most abuse.
Wow. Oh, I've seen steel plates in places they renovated that the pins almost won't knock over. They've worn themselves into the steel and they've had to replace those. The first time I saw synthetic, it wasn't, I don't know, maybe in the 90s. It was where you get your shoes on and you get ready, you set up the computer. I looked down and it looked like maple, but I think it was some form of plastic or melamine or something. And you could tell it just was totally different. And then when you got, that was the approach. And then when you got to the foul line, it was maple from there forward.
Yeah, and some of those they did, and then some of them they, like the more common thing is the other way around. So the lane will actually be synthetic, but the bowler's area, the approach is wood. That has a lot to do with the liability and stuff in bowling, and for some reason, wood approaches are just less apt to have accidents than synthetic approaches because they've just never really gotten that aspect of it right.
I can see that. Is this accurate? I've been told, like, we used to actually bowl. One Christmas, we all got balls and shoes and everything, and we had a good time. But back then, everybody smoked. You're just choking walking out of the place. But the last section, I think they said X so many feet before the pins is oiled. Is that correct?
They start at the foul line and they apply mineral oil down to about 40, 45 feet from the bowler.
Oh, it's opposite. Okay.
Yeah, so it's the front portion of the lane. And that's changed over the years. So in the 80s, we would oil to 28 feet. And then that lasted until the early 90s. And then now we oil down to some of them are as long as 45 or 50 feet, depending on what they do.
Well, my brother-in-law's a bowler. He used to say this way he could get the spin on his ball, and then when it catches the dry pocket, it'll have that hook right into the pins. So I think that was... But as the night goes on, the ball gets oily, the rest of the lane gets oily, and that's why you wash it, you clean it, you polish it, or whatever they do with it.
Well, and so like a lot of what we do, and this has been going on since my dad in the 70s and stuff, a lot of what we do is actually within the scope of just refinishing or maintaining, whether it's a wood or a synthetic bowling lane. We actually kind of go in and optimize the playing condition, the lane base, so that a good bowler can get the best ball reaction. So we go in and we'll actually shape the lane. We'll put a shape into the lane. I'll use abrasives even on the synthetics, and we'll do abrasive reconditioning of the synthetic lane where we go in and we take the embedded bowling ball scratch out and we apply a new scratch so the oil can bond better. So we go in and we create, because like a high performance bowling ball has a lot of them are asymmetrical shaped, dense core in the middle, and a good bowler can manipulate that ball, but you can't overcome the physics of a bad shape of a lane or a bad spot of friction.
Right.
And so we go around and actually will make, a deliberate profile to the lane to make it so that your ball is going to react the best way that it can. And I've kind of paired up with some guys to really get that going. And we've kind of made like a little subsector of our business out of that. So that, it's in high demand right now, because we might go into one bowling center in a city and do what we do and come out and the next thing you know, every bowling center in the city is mad at us because we, well, hey, how come this center's got 300s and 800s coming out of it every night? What the hell did you do there? And so the next thing you know, we're doing 3 or 4 centers in an area to try and get their scoring performance higher. But I also manipulate and set up the oiling machines so that we can put a pattern of oil down that's more conducive or less conducive to scoring pace, depending on what is going out there and what people are looking to do.
Are alleys finished, or they're not finished like a floor, or are they just oiled?
Oh no, they actually have a pretty intense layer of finish on a wood lane. It's would be a single coat of like a moisture cure sealer, and then we'll either float a squeegee or use a dry applicator and put down a base coat. It's either 90% solids or 100% solids, like an epoxy.
Oh yeah.
And then we put another coat of moisture cure on top of it, and then we would maintain that by doing seasonal recoats based on the level of business that's in the center.
Wow.
A synthetic lane is not a coatable maintenance type surface, but there's a lot to do. That was kind of a false bill of sale. Everybody thought they were getting a lifelong, indefinite product, and now here we are 20, 25 years after the big boom that made all the synthetic lanes, where people are figuring out that they have to do maintenance on them. And I just happen to be like one of the only people that's left in the business, and really the only person that's doing that.
That's crazy. Yeah, I ask because every time you run into people, there's other parts of the business, dance floors, dance studios, bowling alleys always come up, and it's always, the one family. If like Rob Johnson, who's out there in our area, his family was famous for a couple things: flooring, bowling alleys, and bagel stores. That was how they got into all that. I have no idea.
Well, yeah, and like we always traded with the bowling centers. It's like my grandfather's thing was bowling centers, golf courses, laundromats. That was the thing and actually there's a guy out by you that owns bowling centers, golf courses, and laundromats.
I wouldn't.
And then you say, you knew like the one family. I don't know. Was that the Shompy family?
It was, Rob Johnson, I think he's with Bona, his family. There was all sorts of them. And then in our area, it's really, some of that stuff's proprietary. And no one ever usually knows those guys. Like, those are the people that do bowling alley. Just ask 1,000 floor guys. They wouldn't know a thing about a bowling. I don't know a thing about a bowling alley. You don't just go in there with a sander and run it. I know it's a one giant belt thing. Is it automated? Or are you driving it? Or the wheels? I've seen wheels that go in the gutters.
I have to control it. The wheels ride on the division caps between the lanes.
Okay.
So I actually have to steer it. So my leadoff machine is a big drum with a mechanical steering wheel. That's what I go and I knock all the tilts off and set everything flat. And then the next machine is the big belt sander. The belt sander I do like my mid sanding with, and I fine tune my tilts, and then we start in with the buffers.
Okay.
You guys up in New England, you guys had a huge company. So there were 2 real big companies that did, what I do. And one of them was my dad's company, and then the other one was out of Massachusetts. So they were Gold Crown Service was the name of the company. They're still around. The sons, actually, they're either in their 3rd or 4th generation because they, and everybody that you would talk to that if they did it or they still do it, everybody is generational, like every single person. So there's a guy out of Ohio that is 3rd generation. There's a guy down in Texas that's 2nd generation. The guys in New England are 3rd or 4th generation. There's another guy in Ohio he's in his 4th generation because his great grandfather did it.
People still bowling.
Yeah, Sharpless out of Pennsylvania, who they built the machines. They're 3 generations, but everybody in that family lives to be like 110 years old. So they've been doing it since like the beginning at 3 generations.
Yeah, since Moby Dick was a minnow, they're still out there everywhere. That's crazy. Yeah. You mentioned it. I read just about everything that you write. Your father, Mark Haas. Can you tell me about your dad? Because you have a lot that you write about. It seems like he's very important. Was he in that side of the business, or did he also do residential floors?
My dad hated residential floors, so that's why we did the residential floors. He used to. He had a catchphrase that rooms should be round. He was notorious for when he got on our residential jobs that he himself booked. He would do things like drag his bag into his belt pulley and fill the whole room full of dust and all that kind of stuff. And then set you up with an edger to edge a whole, flight of stairs with 6 landings and all this kind of stuff. So my dad, he came out of, his father had bowling centers, and his father did lane maintenance in the 60s, the 50s and 60s. So in like 1977, my dad kind of bailed on his dad, not in a bad way, in a good way, but he went out on his own and started refinishing bowling lanes, and he did that up until basically the day that he could no longer do it. So that was how I got introduced. My dad was a pretty cool guy, and there's a lot of people that knew my dad in the business. And every time we go somewhere, it's actually kind of funny, because every time we go somewhere, whether it's like we just did the tour where we went around with FG machines to all the stores and stuff like that, or like when we went to Expo or we went to Surfaces, and there's somebody that'll pull me aside and say, hey, the weirdest thing is I remember your father. And I said, well, yeah, no, that's not so strange to me. He wasn't a super prominent person in what he did. He was kind of a behind the scenes guy, but he did that for so long, and they sanded for so long that, guys from Finnish companies and stuff like that will say, oh yeah, I knew your dad. And I look enough like him to where I get made out in public. Like, people see me at the state fair and know who I am because I look so much like my father. But, so he did that. He started in 77 and ran until, I want to say it was like 2010. It was 9 years ago or 10 years ago when he had the stroke. So,
he had a stroke. Okay. Was that a health thing or from an accident? What was that?
So he had some health problems. He always had high blood pressure and all that. But he did actually spark himself in a panel. He touched the inside of a panel a couple times, and then it got kind of out of control. His kidneys shut down, wasn't filtering the potassium out of his body, so then he got like potassium poisoning. And when I took him into the hospital, the last time that I remember taking him to the hospital, he had flatlined in the truck. He was he was dead when I got him there, but he was still talking to me. And that's the kind of, my old man was one of those tough guys. Yeah. And he was talking to the nurse, and the nurse looked right at him and said, you don't have a pulse. Like she couldn't detect his pulse. And so he was in the hospital for a little bit getting treated for that. That was when he had the stroke, and he was debilitated after that. So he spent 7 or 8 years in a nursing home. I kind of jokingly like to equate it to Al Capone near the end when he would throw the fishing line in his swimming pool and tell stories about people that had died that he didn't know had died. So it wasn't quick. It wasn't pretty. But it all started with an electrocution in a circuit breaker panel. And that's why I'm so adamant about people taking care of themselves when they're doing stuff like that, is because, I got a call it was 2 nights in a row. I got a call where they had said, your father electrocuted himself. And then it was like, hey, he's going to the hospital. And then they thought he had pneumonia. And I'm like, that's not right. And just keeps going and going and going. And it just spiraled out of control and became an absolute mess. So
this episode is brought to you by Odie's Oil. Developed by a wood flooring pro, no finish is more safe, durable, beautifying, and versatile, with lower cost and higher profit margin. Experience the pinnacle of finish with free on-site demos and training. Learn more at odiesoil.com. That's ODIES oil.com.
I just took a gap year after 40 years and 28 years with the same company, and today, I've done everything. I'm all over the place. Somebody said, hey, my kid's sick. Can you come out and help me buff that coat? And I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's around the holidays. Go out. And I like helping him, and he's been in the business forever, so I like to talk with him. And he goes, can you help me carry the equipment to another house? I'm like, sure, got it. We get there. What does he do? Goes upstairs. I see him taking the electrical panel off, and I go, oh. He goes, I've been doing this for years. Yes, we all have. It's the most ridiculous thing. I'd be the guy in the basement walking across a 1x12 with water in the basement to get over to the panel with my alligator clips, and it's all taken apart, and there's no window, the basement's flooded, and I'm going to hook up the panel. And I was with him today, and I'm like, not this again. I mean, I'm helping for the first time in forever, and he's got the clips out. And I'm like, I know you don't want to hear this, but you really, not only should you not be doing this, I'm pretty sure it's against the law. It's not a smart thing to do, is it?
That is a big thing, is it's against the law. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize if you spark a panel, you're never getting insured again. You're never getting, none of that's ever going to happen. So, I mean, I work for a company pretty regularly where one of the reasons that I do so much revenue from this particular company is because they've had several floor sanders burn up panels in their businesses, and I guarantee them that won't happen. Because I'm always using a breaker, or I'll find a different way to get power. Sure. Because I'm not going to allow that to happen. But these guys had people hooking up drum sanders in kitchens with alligator clips and stuff like that, and yeah, they were, hit some paper towels and a grease trap, and the next thing you know, you've got a building that's burned down. Yeah,
as a distributor, we sold those clips up until a couple of years ago. And I did it, and in my box, I had a dryer hookup, a range hookup, alligator clip hookup, and it was always the guy that owned the company. It's still a dumb thing to do. And, what is it with builders? I just was this is 2024, I'm in a development. It's 100 houses, and the guys are in there working all over the place. The houses are built. They give you, the whole house is done, $1.2 million. One socket in the kitchen for $110,000 and no heavy-duty lines. And they got to run clips to the basement. Can't the builder get power to these places? It's ridiculous.
That's my favorite thing to say to a buddy of mine is he'll call me, and I've done probably 15 different flips for this guy, and he's a good friend of mine. And he'll call me and be like, hey, and this is where I get into some of these guys I've been doing business with for so long that we do the doctor thing. I just do the floor and send them the bill. And none of them ever gives me any crap about it. But He'll call me and he'll say, all right, I need to do a floor. He's like, the house will be open for, most of November. All right, cool. Did you make sure you took all the outlets and the lights out? What? Yeah, no, I can't start a floor until you take all of the outlets and all of the lights in the house out, because that's usually the condition that you give them to me in, and I'd like them to be returned.
You're used to it that way.
Yeah, like I wouldn't know what to do if you left me a single outlet. Also, do me a favor, take the toilet out.
Yeah,
and then I'll be over, because apparently I'm not I'm not allowed to have a.
I'm not comfortable with oxygen. If we could remove that too, would be nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Make sure none of the doors have doorknobs on them. So.
I was pretty impressed. They didn't have any power in this house that's already done, and yet right at the corner of the edge of the driveway, with this nice little sidewalks, beautiful development, is a porta potty. I'm like, so we can eliminate. We just can't get the proper electricity. Okay, that's good. Whatever. You've seen this one though, right? You get up the dirt driveway and there's crap all over the yard, and you back your truck up, you get your things, get all set up, and you go, where do we plug in? And they point out the window. And there's a utility pole 100 yards away.
Oh, yeah.
It says lot 17 through 30, and there's all these cords hanging off it.
Yeah, back when I used to, I would argue with people a little bit more about power. Now, mostly I just delete their posts, and people would say, they would call me out, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, you're just afraid of a little electricity and stuff like that." And it's like, man, dude, I have worked in electrical. On a level that you guys would not fathom. Like, I worked in commercial buildings and big, electrical maintenance for $1 billion company and stuff. And that's not me. So then, the people would keep arguing. I say, in my book, you're not a man until you've had to climb a telephone pole with a pair of alligator clips.
Oh,
and
spikes.
Because we've done it. And like that was normal for us back in the day. That was never normal. That was an exception to the rule. But that was something that if we had to do that, we had to do that. But I'm not working like that now. There's nothing that's worth my life.
When
not on a job.
When we were kids, if you went, you climbed everything in your neighborhood, trees and everything. You never climbed a telephone pole because I was full of splinters and spikes. My grandfather and my father had the spikes. You cut the belt, put it around, you shimmied up, you put your spikes in, you climbed up. That's how. They didn't even have ladders for that stuff, and it was dangerous. My dad, when he got older, he'd on a side job. He'd go, wire. We were wiring a flower shop once. It's old New England building, and he couldn't fit under the basement, and it was a dirt crawl space. He'd have me shimmy into there. I'd get all the way under. He'd drop a light down, and he goes, "How does it look?" And it's knob and tube. And I go, "Well, what do I do now?" He goes, "Well, just lick your fingers and just grab it real quick." I thought he was full of crap, but no, that's how he did it. It's not a 210 line. Just grab it real quick. Oh, there you go. That's not going to hurt anybody. Wow.
Did you ever hear to keep your left hand in your pocket? So.
No, what?
Oh, that was my grandfather. One of my two grandfathers was an electrician for Allied Rockwell in Syracuse, and so he would always, he was left-handed, but he'd always keep his left hand in his pocket. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And he said, "Oh, well, that way if I grab a live wire," he said, "the electricity will go around my heart." Yeah, that don't make no sense. Yeah, so I think about that almost every time. If when I see, like, occasionally now, even because now I'm out doing demonstrations with guys and stuff, and okay, all right, he'll say, "Hey, yeah," and every time I'm on a job, "Hey, can you go get me power?" Man, you're gonna make me do that? Like, come on. So then I'm looking in a panel and doing all this and say, "Yeah, okay, I'll install a breaker and run your feed and all that," and then I think about it and my left hand starts to kind of drift down to my pocket because
you were told to. You were trained.
Yeah, that was what you were told to do.
Ninja safety training. I took electrical wiring, automotive electrical, 4 years of it in high school, and every year we had these videos called Uninformed Joe. And they'd be like, "Hey, tomorrow it's Uninformed Joe Day." We're like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever." And it would come on and be like, "This is Uninformed Joe." And he'd be coming out of his house, and there'd be a power line. "Watch out for that power line, Joe." And he'd kick it. Every episode he's in an ambulance. Luckily, he lived through it all. There's always something, a wire dangling down over his house. And that was how they taught it. Don't mess with electricity.
Yeah, that was a little bit what it was like working for my old man sometimes, but. And some of my renovators are pretty close, but they know by now, like, if you leave that, you leave an outlet hanging out and I find out that it's live, I'll just cut it. I'll cut right through it, trip the breaker, and you can reinstall it when I'm done.
There you go.
Because I've had so many times, you bump it with the big machine and it shoots sparks at you and nope, I'm good.
I'm good. Thank you.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Insulated lineaments in my truck for that. I got lineman gloves and all that kind of stuff. I keep all that on my truck. So
I think people don't realize either, too. Okay, so you're risking your own health and safety, but you're setting a precedent for your people. Not only that, you're setting yourself up for a lawsuit. The minute something goes wrong, why go down that road? Why open it up to all of that? Or why even damage your equipment? I have people that go, "Oh, my builder's got me running my Hummel on a generator." Why? Yeah. And they wonder why there's wave in the floor and why it's like it. What do you always hear, right? You've heard I've been doing it 35 years. You know what I always hear is, "Well, I've been doing it that way. I can do that. You can do that." Yes, you can grab wires with your bare hand. You know what? I can go outside and paint your car black. Would you like it painted black? I'll get 50 cans of Cayennise, and I'll go out there and spray it. Yes, you can do it. It doesn't mean it's the right way to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, you're opening yourself up to lawsuits. And I mean, if you go into somebody's house and you electrocute yourself, you're at fault for that. If you are on a builder job and an outlet's hanging out and you electrocute yourself, you're never going to get anything back from that builder. That's why he wants you to send in workman's comp and insurance forms and all that kind of stuff, because, it's the same thing as if you fall through an unfinished stair or something like that. That's not on him. You send him over your comp form. It's going to be, you're going to be the one that's paying for that the rest of your life. And I was from the other side of that when I worked facilities in the years in between the two floor companies. That was my bread and butter, was finding, every way that we could to make sure that I was, that we were going to win and that you were going to lose in everything that you did. And why not protect yourself? It makes no sense to me to not follow some simple guidelines because, if you go in and so many of these guys, this is another big one I get is people talking about dryer and stove outlets. And, if you're running if you're running 5,000 watts out of a 30 amp dryer outlet, or I forget what the cap is, if you're over the cap and you burn up an outlet in somebody's house, you're liable for that too.
Sure.
So, and I get these guys that say, okay, I take a breaker out, I put a breaker back in. Well, all those breakers per code are supposed to be torqued into place.
Right.
And you're taking the wires out of the breakers and you're doing all this and you're putting it all back together. You're the last one that opened that panel. You're the last one that touched that. And all it takes is a homeowner to say after a fire that now you have gone through and done this, that you have, moved a breaker around or something like that. And then that's coming back on you. It's never going to be, I live in a world and I'm a very nervous type person. I know I don't always seem like it. But I always think of what is the worst possible outcome that can happen from this scenario.
Right.
And I prepare myself for that. And I try to take every aspect of that and put it into what I'm doing. So I know what the worst case outcome is, so I'm not the one that's on the end of the lawsuit.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Think of the worst case scenario and go from there. And rethink what you're about to. People do this all the time with gas. Oh, I'll just disconnect the gas here. That violates the Amelia Act, which started here in Moulton Borough, New Hampshire. Whole house blew up. Little girl named Amelia died, and a buddy of mine a few years ago was involved in one. It came down that it was not his fault. I wrote about it in the magazine. Whole house got destroyed. The car got destroyed. Everything. No one got hurt in this one, but he got out of Florida. He couldn't even get insurance after that because the insurance companies fought over who was to blame.
Yep.
And no one wanted to pay. It's great. I read a lot of what you're writing in wood floor business, and you're like me. When I see an opening, I'll put something in, or the magazine might say you got a little filler or whatever. I know in October, November, and not to go back to bowling alleys, but didn't you write a ghost story about a bowling alley?
Oh yeah.
Tell people about that. When people in the podcast got to hear this if they haven't read it already.
Yeah, that was like a wild night. So we were doing our night. We used to do our nighttime recoats in the middle of the middle of the winter. Sometimes they'd be right around Christmas. And so there was this old guy that worked at one of the centers, and they had locked up. And I walked around to go back through the door, and this guy was just like hanging by. He walked out of the door, and he said something to me, and I didn't hear the first thing that he said. And he's like, "Where's Mike?" And I'm like, I don't know, man, but we're closed. You got to get out of here. And so then I circled back around to where I had my stuff, and then I walked back around towards the door to go out the door, and the door was locked. And I was like, wow, that was weird, And so I started talking to the guy, Mike. The guy had told me that his name was Harvey, or Harvey was the guy's name. And so I came back in, and I had started talking to Mike, and I said, oh, yeah. He said something along the lines of like, tell Mike I said hi. And I was like, okay. So I finally say to Mike, yeah, this dude Harvey came in, he snuck in the back door, and he was looking for you. And this dude got white as a ghost. He was an old guy I'd known my entire life, had worked in the one bowling alley for 20-something years. And that was when they told me the ghost story about the dude Harvey that apparently was the ghost that inhabited that bowling alley.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I'm not really like a supernatural kind of guy. I get weird feelings a lot. Yeah. This is where my guy Brad is pretty good because I'll say, hey, dude, can you go down there and check on something? He'll be like, well, what did you see? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw somebody walking down there, and you don't believe in ghosts, so it's either a ghost or we're going to get robbed at gunpoint in the middle of Detroit in the middle of the night.
Yeah, you go.
Maybe you walk down there instead of me.
It's great. Well, yeah, I'm here in New England, so if you go into new houses, new construction, houses from the 60s, 70s days, there's no particular feeling to these places. But when you go in a house that's 1600s, 1700s, I'm telling you, they get a little creepy vibe. I did a monastery in New Boston, New Hampshire, and it was run by Carmelite monks, and these are priests and monks. And I said, I heard this place was haunted. They go, oh, dude, this place is haunted. The head priest said, you guys have been here doing the floors a week, and we hear spirits talking about why the house is in such disorder and what's going on. So we're hearing all this stuff. If you look on the map of New Hampshire, Scobie Pond, on the map, it's called Haunted Pond. They said because every year fire rescue goes out for these stranded people in a boat that by the time they get there are never there. So we hear all this. And this is in the woods. It's a 100-acre old New England, and the barn has this giant crucifix from the front of a ship in it. It is just the neatest place, and they've turned it into this monastery. Well, my guys are so freaked by that, and it's winter. It's getting dark at 4. At 4:30, they never load the truck. They're vacuuming. They're cleaning. The truck is all loaded. They're like, let's go. Come on, want to get going. We want to go. They're afraid of this place. So it was around Christmas time, and they had red lights up in the window, and one of the guys that worked for me kept saying, dude, I'm seeing eyes. I could see things. This place freaks me out. So next to the fireplace, they had this little cupboard, and my buddy Mike was in this part of the church service area, this kind of a sunroom. He's edging, and I found I could fit in this little wainscoting cupboard, and it's right next to the plug. So what I did was I got myself squished in there, and I reached out and I unplugged the edger and I pulled it tight. He doesn't even look like a door. It must be for firewood or something. It freaked him out. So he comes out, he's looking around, goes back to edging. I did it again. I didn't tell him for, I think, 12 years. I sold him my company. We got together one time, and I go, hey, remember the haunted monastery? He goes, that place, my equipment kept shutting down. I go, I told him this story. He hates me to this day. He said it scared him for life.
One kind of awesome thing about my father was if he could play a prank on you when this was before he started to kind of have a decline. But if he could play a prank on you, he would do that. And so he would, tell you to go check out the basement at this place, or go walk down behind the machines here and see, do it in the dark and all that. And my dad knew about every creepy place that you could find in every bowling center or commercial building that we maintained. And this was, he had been doing it a lot longer than I had. So, and I'll tell you that there's a lot of places, and I spent a lot of time alone in these places at night. And yeah, there's a lot of creepy places that you really don't want to be, that I do seem to collect them because that's just, you can't get away from it.
You know how you know? And I lived in a farmhouse from 1865. It's no matter what, no matter how long I lived there, leaving the basement, I have to quickly shut the door behind me. I swear you feel like somebody's following you and your hair stands up on end. It's the creepiest thing.
I got one place that I go to where I run through the place, like at night, and like it's not even that you feel like somebody is following you, it's that you feel like somebody is chasing you angrily through this building. And that's one of the places where now they have managed to switch to days. Like I no matter how many nights we work in a summer, that one particular business, I will not go in there at night. I've got apartment complexes that creep me out when I'm there during the day.
They're creepy.
Yeah. And then, you tell the owners and they're like, oh no, you're just worried because some guy killed himself in that unit. And you're like, what?
Right.
No. Yeah. Or the classic, the meme that goes around all the time where, my landlord says that this was a water leak or something from the dishwasher, and it's very clearly an imprint of a man into a floor. Oh, I cannot tell you how many apartments I've started sanding and then call the landlord in and go, hey, there's a guy's face in that floor. And he'll look at it and go, no. And then I'll say, okay. And then I'll draw it on with the lumber crayon. And he'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, can you cut that out of there? Like, dude, I ain't touching this.
I ain't touching anything.
Yeah. Like, why is that there? He'll be like, oh, well, you don't want to know what we found that made me, call you to refinish this unit. It's like, oh, man.
Oh, that's crazy. We got to do, I got an idea. So what we got to do is next year, somewhere before October, you and I got to sit down. We know everybody. Let's get everybody from the industry to give us their flooring or their construction ghost stories. And you and I'll put together a podcast just for Halloween. Because guys have stories like this. I know people don't believe in stuff, but I've seen some weird stuff.
We could do 30 minutes on just the dismemberment that I've had to go in afterwards. So when we first started back into the floor thing, one thing that I found that was kind of lucrative when I had first started back into floors was cleaning up crime scenes, like refinishing after crime scene cleaners. So I had this dude that used to refer me jobs, and it didn't bother me, for a lot of it. But they started it. Some of them got pretty gnarly, and that was when I decided that I was going to stop doing that. You got to have a license to like cut the flooring out. So we don't do any of the. I never did any of the repairs. He would leave me like a 4x4 square, and I'd say, well, I'm probably not going to spend too much time hanging out in there. And then I would come in and either lace in a floor or replace a room and do the refinishing and stuff to get it on the road or get it down the road. And that was a way that when I started up, I came up with a lot of really creative ways to generate revenue. I was the Craigslist killer for a long time, where I had the most elaborate Craigslist ads forever.
Oh no!
And that was when that was going, and I did pretty good in that. But when I first came back starting with my dad doing the bowling stuff and doing his residential forum, and then I left to work in facilities. I really probably was only gone for about 5 years because we started the floor company up while I was still working for the big company and doing maintenance for them and stuff. It was basically, started up, and everything was kind of new. Like a lot of things had pivoted over. There was water-based was big, and stains were popular where they weren't when we had done this, and even 15, 20 years ago. And so I was kind of clueless about the business, and you take every job that gets thrown at you. So then we came up with all sorts of goofy ways to drive business. And I got some really good customers. I have a lot of customers from that still, call me to this day, and they're not, it's not low rate work that I'm doing. It's just, they've been using me now for 11, 12 years since I got back into it, and they like what they see. So
I think it'd be a bad idea if we did a whole thing on floor pranks. Everybody's got them. I think we'd be training a new generation to do very terrible things.
Or I think a lot of guys, everybody forgets, that they started somewhere. I think a lot of guys, I think you should ask everybody that comes on about what their worst floor was, or like when you talk to Kent and Jamie about the first floor.
Yeah.
And I had heard the Kent story with the first floor before, and he went even further into detail when he was talking to me.
Like 6,000 feet of heart pine, and they never even seen wood before in their lives.
He got on it with a stroke sander, and I'm like, oh my God. So, I think that's a good one. Tell me your first floor or your worst floor.
Hey, let me ask you. So you mentioned Porter Cable, right? When I was selling tools, they came out with things they called the Porter Cable clapboard sander. It's a disc grinder with a little level, and you put it up against the clapboard, and you could grind all the lead paint off and whatever. That's how I did my first floor, because I learned the edger for a day, and I went home and I go, I can do this. I took my clapboard sander apart, and I hand ground a birch floor in my living room. And, of course, it looked good. It was hideous. As I got good at flooring, I used to feel so ashamed that my mother-in-law would let people in our gift shop and say, you should come in and see my son-in-law's floors. And all you could see was grind and sander grind and mark and everything everywhere. What a bad way to do a floor. Do you remember your first? I was scared to death. I remember the Stooges doing plumbing in a house. And the more they worked, the more everything broke. And the more everything broke, things were... And I thought, that's going to be me. I'm going to destroy somebody's house. I should never be doing this. And that didn't happen, but I was scared for the first several months.
My first floor, you want to talk about me on my own, or you want to talk about just what I remember from the first floor I ever did?
You pick them both.
The first real job that I remember is not too far from you. It was at Holiday Lanes in Somerset, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And it was, like I said, my dad had a grand plan that he was going to bring me out and teach me how to do all this and all that. And so the big Lane belt sander, he handed me, I had run that when I was a kid, so I knew how to run it. And he handed me that. And I did that for like the whole first day. He said, oh yeah, no, we're going to teach you how to drum and edge. And so they handed me the self-powered big Lane rolling belt sander. And I was stuck on that for the whole job because that night, all of his employees went out to the bar and got into a fight with what happened to be a Massachusetts state police officer. So the next day it was just me and like one other guy and my dad on the job. So we had to sand a 34 lane or 36 lane bowling center with the three of us. We didn't, and it was still, no matter how many guys were on that job, you had to get that thing done.
Get it done
in 2 days or 3 days or whatever. So, and that was with all the finish coats and everything. And so, it went from like, oh yeah, here, stand here and hold this while I figure out what to do with you. But like, TJ, you're drumming, you're edging, we're going to put you on a buffer. And then my father conveniently forgot that he had taught me many of those things for years. So then every time somebody quit or they would move me around, he would be like, we got to teach you how to edge. And I'd be like, oh, do you do it like this? And, and then just pick the next tool up.
Yep.
And he largely forgot about that. But that one was a mess.
That's crazy.
My first job on my own, I'm trying to remember. We had one where we that was with my father still.
It's when you get that imposter syndrome, you just, what am I doing?
Yeah, I had a floor that we rented an Easy 8, and I ran like 15 cuts with the Easy 8 and then square buffed the whole job. And then I didn't have a round buffer. I had to rent an Easy 8. I did have an edger because I've always had the same edger. And then, because I didn't have a round buffer and I was so used to the hard plate, I went out and I got fire resistant paneling, like FRP sheets.
Whoa.
And I cut them into 12 by 18 and we liquid nailed them to the bottom of the, to the 12 by 18 to the orbital. And I made like a hard plate
orbital.
BS-18
with
sheet paper and everything like that. And so we ran that. I ran that with a buddy of mine because I kind of started up to give my buddy something to do because he had worked for my father and then quit because he couldn't get along with my dad and so on and so forth. And so we ran that, I think, like 20 times across his floor. And it was the flattest floor you ever saw in your entire life. I would say Kent and Jamie with the stroke sander definitely have me.
Didn't have little hoopties all over the place or anything.
By the time I ran it through the grits, man, there was no hoops left. There was no ring or none of that.
None of that.
Yeah, the Mighty Mouse scratch. It was just, the floor looked like a table. And then I spent a long time trying to figure out how to get back to that because I took the money from that first floor and I bought a company that was local to me that had closed. I bought all their equipment, and I always tell the story that it was $721 was what I had.
Yep. And
I bought an entire warehouse full of all the last things that the guy had. So it was like an old Classic 8 belt sander and a old Super 7 that barely worked and a round buffer.
I had a Super 7 that sparked all over the place. It smelled like it was going to explode.
Yeah, it had a round buffer with a light switch on the handle.
Yeah. Wooden handle with light switch.
Yeah. So, but I still have the Classic 8. I still have the Super 7. I won't get rid of the Classic 8 because it was the machine that I started back up with, and it's my machine, and you can fight me for it.
I had an SX SL8, which was the famous rental. You just tilt to go. It's like water skiing because when it caught wax, it'd just be sliding left, It looked like a buffer, but it was 110, so I really couldn't hurt. I used that 2 years. Until I could get a big machine. But, you said what, the Easy 8? The Easy 8 has the little drop handle.
Yeah, so it has, so I knew.
Oh, that's a pretty good little machine. I like that.
Yeah, I knew which ones to go rent when I had to come back in because, we had done a few jobs over the years where we had to go, like we had a drum blow up or something like that, and we had to go rent. So I knew that you could, I know that Home Depot rents Easy 8. So and sometimes I'll, we'll drive out to a place and find out that we might need to flush in the seams on a subfloor or something like that.
Yep.
And I may not have the drum with me, and then I'll go out and rent an Easy 8. So
it's just the paper's a little expensive, but you put the little sleeve on there. I used to teach little seminars around the country, and rather than bring a bunch of big equipment, at least I've got the drop handle. I could get in, use it real quick, move on, and do whatever. Yeah. It's funny. I think both of us get labeled with that. Oh, they're such a character. I crack up because when I read some of your stuff, it just I can totally connect with it. But see if you can answer this. You wrote something online. They had this little thing in Wood Floor Business about, you're a floor guy when. Do you remember what your answer was?
I remember. It was really funny. I don't remember what it was.
I know. It was great. Everybody's going along like, I got my first big machine. I got my first paycheck. You said, and I quote, you pick your nose with your thumb.
Oh my God.
I thought about it. I'm like, he's right. When you're a little kid, you might be a pinky, you might be knuckle deep. When you've been sanding all day, especially if it gets under your, people do not understand. Okay, people that went through COVID, ask a floor guy how to put a mask on. You don't leave the little steel strip like a pup tent. You conform it to your nose. I could never tell my partner not to do that. He would take his mask off. He'd have this giant pile of white oak dust. And he would say, we'd go in the shower, his eyes would glue, and he'd blow brown snot everywhere. Well, when you said that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. You really got to get in there with your thumb if you're going to get that stuff out of there.
Yeah. And it's always the same thing. And then we all eventually develop where our nostrils look like we've been doing drugs for our entire lives, because you got to get it. That's actually a really old joke, because picking your nose with your thumb. So one of my father's original business partners was like this weird guy, and it was one of those guys that nobody liked but everybody liked, and he was a real strange character. And he has since passed away, so I could pretty much tell any story I want about him. But so. There's a story where my father got a call from a customer that he had been trying to get for years. And he said, okay, yeah, well, I want you to do the job, and I want you to start, like the 15th. And my dad's like, all right, but let me ask you this. What changed your mind? And he said, oh, your partner stopped by here, and he talked to me, and he got me, everything I needed. And he's a smart man, and he's a very well informed man, and he told me why I should go with you, and I agree with him. And my dad's like, my partner, and he's like, yeah, Mo. And my dad's like, Mo stopped at your bowling center? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, what an unusual character. He said, he's the first person that I ever met that I watched him pick his nose and scratch his balls, and then I shook his hand afterwards.
That's love. That's right there. That's some respect.
The dude used to pick his nose with his thumb, so everybody made fun of him for years about picking your nose with your thumb.
He's a thumb picker. It's a pick. The old Seinfeld. I'm in the pick. I'm up to my wrist.
It's always the edger guys, too. The edger guys, you see them bent over,
yes.
The older edger guys, and then they stand up, and then they get a quick thumb in their nose. And
we didn't have dust containment. That's so the bag was always leaking, or it's got a little that fine powder's coming up from underneath. It's all over.
Oh, we had bags for so long. I didn't get into dust containment until I came back and I was in the Facebook groups, and then we were doing like the building our own vacuums and all the weird stuff. And then I got into the newer stuff. I bought a few Oneida systems and stuff. What a game changer that is. No doubt in my mind that is the best way that we have spent time and money, is figuring that out over the years. And from the commercial side, restaurants, bars, bowling alleys, that kind of stuff. These places, we knock them dead when we go in compared to, the crew that they've been using for 15 years or something like that. We go in with dust containment, and these guys are, they've got the plastic hung and they've got their cleaning crews ready. And I say, well, no, you're not going to have to do any of that.
Right.
When they never believed me the first time.
No, they always say, no such thing as dust free. Like, there's a massive difference. What are the things people hate? Concrete dust, drywall dust, and wood floor dust, and all of the technology for dust containment comes from the concrete industry and drywall, because it's such a pain in the butt. But remember, if you we used to put up sheets. I'll tell you what, I show you an NWFA manual that suggests hanging sheets and spraying them with damp water. Yeah. We've come a long way. Then remember the decade where everybody was putting up those curtains with the 3M film and everything? If you had a hole the size of a dime, the whole house was trashed. I did a floor today, and I was furious because I said, let me vacuum for you guys. I couldn't find anything to vacuum. It was amazing how clean it was.
We had the door suction units and all that kind of stuff where, we had built our own with my dad and all that. And then, I first started to get back into it. And at one point, my dad was actually helping me as working for me, so I'd pay him. That was kind of a weird trade-off. But he was helping me with the engineering of like the suction units, and we tried a truck mount vacuum and all that. It's incredible. Even now, the difference in dust containment now compared to 10 or 20 years ago we're light years ahead of what we had. But now it's incredible. And I do so many jobs where people don't believe, and we do so much just with the planetary now, where we're not even going in and running a belt sander or running a drum sander. And that's where I'm getting these great reviews from people where, just one step even further, not running the big machine, not running the belt machine, is that much less dust that we're getting.
There was too much good stuff to talk about with TJ, so we're breaking this episode into 2 parts. Keep an eye out for part 2 coming soon. In the meantime, you can find the articles they mentioned in the show notes for this episode. Or go to woodfloorbusiness.com and put TJ Haas, that's Haas, in the search bar. And if you enjoyed this episode of All Things Wood Floor, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.